Alright guys, so here's my new John Deere here, and it runs with spraying gas into the carburetor, so that means that obviously it's not getting gas through the jets. So I'm going to show you how to disassemble it and clean out the carburetor. First, you're going to go ahead and take the air box and the air filter off. There's a little nut that goes onto the stud that keeps the air filter on, so don't try to rip it off. And then go ahead and take the little screen here for the air cooled intake deal, and then take all the screws off for the shroud, including the fuel pump, so that way you can get back down to those screws down there. And then once you have the shroud off, I'll show you the rest. Here's the fuel pump, and you can go ahead and bend the fuel line up over there. You don't have to have your battery off, but I recommend it. And then that way the fuel doesn't spill everywhere. And then after that, again, take those two screws off behind the fuel pump and that one, and then the shroud comes off. A good tip is to keep your screws in the holes that they were in to remember where they went. The shroud bolts are all the same, they all look like that, so that doesn't matter. And as you can see, this engine is like brand new. I mean, look at it. I don't even know how I have this thing, but anyway, now I'm going to go ahead and take the air box off, and that is done by just taking these nuts off back here. Okay, so until now everything was 10mm that I'm using with the Ryobi Impact, but now there are a few Phillips head screws in there. I don't know if you can see those, but I recommend using these style bits, the black ones. Don't use it on a drill, just use it with one of these, and that makes your screws last longer, so you can do this again multiple times without having to replace screws or cut them. So now that that's all off, try to save this gasket and go ahead and carefully remove all these hoses. As you can see, I already took my fuel pump off, so that hose can stay on there. So I just need to get this one out of the way, and it should come off. First there's a ground wire, and then I'll show you how to get the linkages off. There's also a wire on the bottom to stop the gas flow when you turn the key off. So just make sure that you're not bending anything, especially this one right here. Make sure that's not on there. And then just slide it off. And then this one, you just kind of have to be firm, and then it comes off. And then this one, it's the same way. Sorry, it's hard to do this with one hand. And there you go. And just remember that the bat one right here is the choke, and then this is the throttle. Okay? And the location of the spring is not seriously important. You don't really need that. That's mainly just to keep it on there, but it goes right in the same hole as the actual linkage itself, so it's pretty simple. So now I'm in the shop, I got all the hoses off, and you're going to start by making sure the outside is clean. So I'm just going to blow it off with the air compressor. You can use engine degreaser or carb cleaner, it doesn't really matter. If you're not like me, go ahead and get a pan to put the gas into. It's going to spill everywhere. And then get I think it's a 18mm wrench, or just your crescent wrench, and take that off right there. That's the nut for the float bowl. Tap the float bowl loose with a screwdriver handle or something, just to carefully get it off of this gasket here, because that is shot. Obviously, once you start having ethanol problems in your carburetor, then obviously your rubber is not good anymore, so just don't break the rubber. And first I'm going to check if this little guy works, because if this isn't closing, going down, then we're not getting gas into the engine. Okay, now this one I realize needs help. It doesn't do the full travel. It has to be already a little bit down or compressed, but you can do this just by turning the key on your mower, because that's really all it's doing. When you turn the keys, it's opening that little guy, so that way it definitely shuts off when you turn the key off. But I don't know if you can hear that, but that's it working, so that's good. Moving on, as you can see, there's a bunch of junk in there. That's from gas. Some people put higher octane gas in their stuff, and that's what happens, or just from regular gas sitting, that's what happens. But you can see it's all in that jet. That's how the gas gets up into that area and then goes through the tube sticking into the venturi. So that's where the gas is sucked up and it can't get through there. So I'm going to go ahead and punch this pin out to start out of the float there, and then we'll go from there. A little stuck. So that looks like it was moving, but the gas just couldn't get into the jet. So I don't have that impact style bit for this, but I'm just gonna hope that I don't mess anything up. But this is our issue right here. However, I am going to clean out the main jet. Yeah, I literally cannot see through that, so there's no gas getting in there at all. Where is it? There's no hole there, so I'm going to go ahead and clean that with a wire brush. I just take one of the bristles and stick it through there. So now that you can see the light clearly through that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the main jet. So you're going to want to find the biggest possible standard bit that you can fit in here, and kind of line it up in the middle as best as you can. And yeah, so that's stripped now. So it cut the brass. So basically now we're going to pause while I try to get this out. Okay, so this was insanely lucky, guys. So go ahead and do yourself a favor and get the bit that is the same width as the hole, and if it doesn't fit, then grind down the edges of it and make it fit in there, and not do what I just did, because what happens is with this brass is if it's not perfectly centered, it'll move over and you'll crack the brass, and then you won't have a area to grip onto on that side, so you'll just have one side. But with this, it's the exact same size, so I was able to use a torch and some PB blaster penetrating oil and just kind of torch it over and over again until it loosened up enough for me to tighten it and then loosen it very carefully. But you can see it's pretty much destroyed. It's got brass missing right there. That's what happened. But yeah, that took like 10 minutes, so don't do that. Okay, and there's another jet that looks identical to that in there, and I'm going to go ahead and spray some of that in there and take my homemade deal here and see if it fits down in there. Which it does, but I don't think it's hitting the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and grind a little bit more off of there. And the other way you could have done that, or you can do this, is just by getting some of this penetrating oil and just letting it sit for like a good 20 minutes or more, if you really want to be safe, and then you can use that same bit if you don't have a grinder or whatever. But yeah, so I would get a bigger bit, the biggest bit you can find, and that'll be assurance that you won't strip out that brass. Uh-oh. So whenever I put the screwdriver on this, it sucks it up to where it's not at the bottom anymore, so I'm going to find a different screwdriver. You can also destroy one of these or just get a screwdriver. If you have a nice screwdriver set, just use a screwdriver, but I broke all my screwdrivers, so I just destroy these whenever I need to make a custom tool. And as you can see, that worked first try, so I'm going to pull that out. Okay, so this one was equally as hard to get out as the other one, but as you can see, I did kind of save it. There's no brass missing, but now I'm basically going to kind of wire brush this thing and make sure that everything's cleaned out, and then I'm going to clean these and then put it back together. Okay, so I got this screw out here. I forgot about these. I'm going to pull that one out. Just remember how many turns you unscrewed it. It was to unscrew it, and then we'll put it back in that many turns. There's also a screw right here, and then I'm just going to blow out all those channels. Alright, so now that all that is cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and start by putting this back in. And then the other jet. Now these guys on the outside. Now this little guy that was clogged. And finally, the float and float pin get to go on. I believe that the this part of it goes that way. The oh my gosh. But the metal piece is just over a little bit, that way it's kind of hard to see. And then, I mean, it probably won't even make a difference, so I wouldn't worry about it. But you could always just look at how it was before you took it off, and then push the pin in. And then you're going to want to make sure that it moves fairly easily, and then get your cleaned float bowl and make sure the one that's spring loaded, which is the choke, that this little screw here is facing that way, and then get the gas stopper deal that keeps the gas from getting into the motor or shuts it off. It could be named either way. And get your little copper thing here as a washer, and stick that on. Take pictures, if you're watching this before you do it, take pictures of your motor so that way you know where the components went, the hoses and stuff, and then you won't have to be confused about where all the hoses go. It's so quiet. There you go.